Thank you so much. My name's Tony. I'm an alcoholic. And it is very unfortunate that Phyllis wasn't able to make it for you guys. And so I will try to be the best fill-in that I can be for Phyllis. And it's like as he introduced me, and he's like, "Who's going to do that?" And I was like, "Well, I am." And so I don't know what that says about me. I got nothing planned. But I will say this disclaimer is that I didn't realize the OU game was going to be on at this time. So there was bad planning on my part. But no, my name, as I stated, was Tony. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is August 16, 2004. For that, I'm truly grateful. I have a home group. It's a men's meeting that meets on Wednesday nights in Oklahoma City. So if you're ever in Oklahoma City and you're a man and you would like to attend that meeting, then let me know. If you're a female and you're in Oklahoma City, let me know as well, and I can hook you up with some really good women's meeting. One of the things that I like to make sure everybody knows is that I have a sponsor. He knows he's my sponsor, and I think that's a big part of it in this thing is that he does know that, and he's been my sponsor for a long, long time. And that is who gave out my number. And what's really bizarre is that my week at work has been very packed, and I haven't had my phone on me at work very much. And it just so happened the day that I got that call, I was walking down the hall and I had my phone. And I thought, I don't recognize this number. And my natural instinct is don't answer it, because I don't recognize it. But I did, and I get this lovely opportunity to be with you guys tonight. So I'm truly grateful for that. So, what's happened for me is, this is kind of how I got my first speaking engagement, really, in Alcoholics Anonymous, is that somebody called my sponsor, Cliff, and said, "Hey, the Maryland State Conference is going on. We had a speaker get sick. You got any?" Actually, they were asking him if he was available, and he said, "I'm booked." And they're like, "Well, you got somebody else?" And they were like, "Here, call Tony." And so, as I was going on that trip, I got on the plane there in Oklahoma City, and I had a connection somewhere. And I get on that plane, and wherever the connection was, and we're sitting there, and the staff gets on the intercom, and they're talking, and they say, "We're just going to let everybody know that we're not going to have any peanuts on this flight. There's somebody with a severe, severe peanut allergy." And they're just, and you hear the whole plane just gasping about these peanuts. Like, "Oh my gosh, we're not going to get these 5 peanuts. Like, what are we going to do?" And, and the only thing that came to my mind was just like, well, wait till they hear about my allergy. We're going to shut this plane down, like, for real. Like, it's just, there's going to be no peanuts and no alcohol. And, but, whenever I took that first drink of alcohol, nowhere did I know in my mind that there would be some kind of a reaction in my body. I was just a young 17-year-old kid that was in band, was in high school, worked at a fast food restaurant. My parents own a sewing machine store, so I didn't have a lot going on for me, really. And what I just decided one day is that, life had just become unbearable at this 17 years old. I mean, I got everything I wanted. I got to do whatever I wanted. And, and I was just like, we need to have a party, like any 17-year-old kid would do. And so what happened is that I made this decision to have this party, and then what I decided is that we needed alcohol. Now, what you have to know is that nobody in my family drank alcohol. So this was just an idea that originated within self, and I just embarked on that journey. And in Oklahoma at that time, the legal drinking or the legal age for men was like 18 or 19 that you could buy. So I had my brother buy me some alcohol. Now the issue is that what happens whenever you're getting that first order of alcohol, and whenever you don't know anything about alcohol, is you don't know how to order it. And so with that, what happened? Hang on one second, I got to undo this. So what happened was I went to him and said, "Hey, I'm going to have this party, and you're invited, and I just need you to get us some alcohol." And he said, "Perfect, what do you want?" And that's a very perplexing question for the first order, right? And I said, "Well, let me get back to you." And what happened is that I went and I researched, and at that time, Rolling Stone magazine was the research tool that I used. And there's a lot of ads in Rolling Stone. And, and what I came to is at the very back page of Rolling Stone magazine, in this full color ad, there it was. And I said, this is what we need. And it was Bartles and James wine coolers. And I said, this is going to be what we need. And I went back to him and I said, hey, I need some Bartles and James wine cooler. And he said, well, how many? Another perplexing question for somebody who's never drank. And I said, 4 cases, because I don't know anything about alcohol. And I'm thinking, I've seen them in the store that's going to be like 16 wine coolers. I don't know the wine cooler to 17-year-old ratio. So, I just thought that's what I was ordering. And then he said, well, what flavor? And I said, peach. And so he comes wheeling in with this dolly 2 days later of 4 cases of wine coolers, all peach. And I just thought, who would think that was logical? That was my first thought. And then my second thought was, I'm going to have to drink all of these. And that's where it was, is before the alcohol ever entered my body, I had this idea that whatever you placed in front of me, I had to consume it all. And I can tell you that my little 17-year-old self did everything I could to drink as many peach wine coolers as I could that night. And I woke up the next day and I said, I'm never drinking anything peach again in my life. But you know what? I thought, there's got to be other stuff out there. And that's the way my journey started. It was nothing in my past. It wasn't that my mom married her boss. It wasn't that me and my dad didn't get along. It was none of that stuff that made me the alcoholic. What happened was that whenever I consumed that first drink, I had the allergy of my body, and I had that obsession of the mind, and I embarked on that journey from the rest of the time. And when I went through high school and I didn't have any problems, I got a scholarship to the University of Oklahoma in music, and I went to OU, and I was doing the things, and I manipulated my way to get my own apartment the first semester, and I had a brand new Mustang, and my life was less looking good. But all I could do is think about alcohol. And I started to get people to buy me alcohol, and it didn't matter what it was. I would drink whatever it was. And then I started this shrine on top of my refrigerator of just, everything that I drank. And I started making those decisions at that time whenever I was in college about whether I should buy food or I should buy alcohol. And I can tell you alcohol won out every single time because I didn't need food. What I needed was alcohol because it made me feel better and it made me feel a part of. And I did everything that the book talks about, where it talks about Bill went to the class drunk and he would take his test drunk and everything. I did all of that and I tried all of that. And I could never find the right schedule that worked for my drinking. I'd think, well, if I get an early enough schedule, let's do a 7 a.m. class because that makes perfect sense. Well, it's just and then, I show up the majority of the time and I'm reeking of alcohol. And then I show up and I'm still drunk from the night before and I do the best I've ever done on a test. And I tell myself, that's the key. I'm just too stressed out whenever I take these tests. I need to be loose. And then the next time I do the same thing, and what happens is I fail the test. And then I say, well, this is just not working, right? And I try all these things to be the right person that I think I need to be so that everybody thinks that I'm cool and that I can be okay with life, and I can never find that combination. And then what happens is I get tired of being reliant on other people, right? Because I need to control what I need to control. Because I need everybody to act the way that I need them to act. I need everything to go the way I need it to go, and I need all circumstances to be the way I need them so that I can be okay, because if not, I'm not okay. So I did the next logical thing, is that I'm tired of paying people to get me alcohol. So 4th of July weekend came, July 5th came. I took my brother's birth certificate and his Social Security card down to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and I got an ID. And I walked up and I said, hey, I lost my ID at the lake this holiday. And she said, all right. And she typed in, I know his address, I know his birth date, I know his Social Security number because it's 2 digits off from mine. And then she looks in the system and looks at me and she said, you're 6 foot? I said, absolutely. And she said, you have red hair? And I said, absolutely. And she said, that'll be $5. And then she printed me out that ID, and I was a free man. I then and there was free. And I did the most logical thing you could do after you get a fake ID is that I went straight to the liquor store. And now the problem is I've never been in a liquor store, so I'm walking around trying to decide. And I know one simple thing is it can't be peach. That's the only thing that I know. And I'm walking around, and I've got a price point in mind because I'm a struggling college student. I'm working, 11 hours a week, and I'm, taking 12 hours of class, and, life is just, I'm struggling here. And I look there it is on the bottom shelf, and it's orange, so it passes the only test I have is it just can't be peach. And I get that, and I walk up to the counter, and I put that on the counter, and that guy looks at me. He looks at that Mad Dog 2020 and looks back at me, and he's like, "You got an ID?" And I handed it to him, and I swear that was still warm from the laminating machine. That's how quick I got there. And he rang that up, and he got my whatever it was, like probably at that time it was about $275, and I paid him that, and I went home. And that was definitely not a wine cooler or anything I'd ever experienced, but I was committed to that bottle, and me and that bottle made it through the night. And the next day I woke up and I said, "Man, I can't do anything orange ever again," and to this day I haven't. But, it's just like I didn't have any consequences in. I got a degree, It's just like the book talks about half measures availed us nothing. Well, I can tell you this, is that in my life, half measures have availed me a college degree, a high school degree, and a decent career for a long period of time. And so what happens is that drinking becomes the most important thing in my life. It's like I can't live without it, and I can't live with it. And I'm starting to have just these things, and I'm on this grandiose tour of myself, and I get this job after I get out of college, and I'm living in Tulsa, and then I get this promotion to move to Kansas City, and I become somebody important because I've got a cell phone, a corporate card, and I'm traveling, and I'm doing big things. And really what I'm doing is I'm manipulating everybody I can find around me to actually do the things that I need them to do so that I can be okay because I'm just a title. And I make these decisions based on material things. Like if I can get a Toyota 4Runner, I will have succeeded in life. And you know what? I went and bought that Toyota 4Runner. And I was driving home, and I was so proud of myself. And I pulled in the garage. I opened the door, and it hit the side of the garage, and because it was bigger than my last car. And I said, well, now I need a bigger house. See, I'm never satisfied with what I have. And the book tells me that the material things are not going to fill the issues that I have. But that's the only thing that I knew, was to drink and to get material stuff. And along the way, I got in this relationship, and it lasted for about 10 years, and I don't really have any problems going on in life. Life is good. I've got a car. Actually, I got 3 cars, a house. I'm, doing well at work, and life is good. But then something all of a sudden flipped in me, and it's just like the drinking started to consume my time. And everybody that I worked with drank, so it just looked like we were just always, drinking, and there was no problem. But what I didn't realize is that they went to their room and went to sleep. And I never did. I just stayed up drinking as long as I could. And then I started to do things like this, because this is what I've done at every job I had up until I was sober, is I started to steal. And what stealing looks like is various different things, but really what it looked like for me at that point is that I was writing fake expense reports. I was not leaving my house, and I was a world traveler. And I want you to know this, is that, whenever I say I was making fake expense reports, it was not with, any computer. It was at Kinko's with some whiteout and some tape, and we were doing old school stuff there, making fake receipts and all of this type of stuff. And, and somewhere along this way, I made this decision that I was going to be single in a year. And this is how I do relationships, is I make a decision in them, and I don't tell anybody else about them. Like a credit card, I decide that I no longer need you because you're maxed out, so therefore I just don't pay you, and it'll all work itself out, and that's kind of how I live my life whenever I'm drinking. And I decided I'm going to be single in a year, and what happens is I go on this excursion, and what the book says is that if I have a sufficient reason, if I'm a hard drinker, if I have a sufficient reason, I can stop drinking. Well, I can tell you I had a sufficient reason. I'm going to be single in a year. I put on some alcohol weight, and I need to get that off, and I need to look good for whenever I get out on the market. And I started exercising every single day. I would run 3.5 miles. I would do all this stuff. I ate healthy, and man, I slimmed down and I looked amazing. And then what happened was that year came, and I became single. And, and it was a disaster. It was a complete disaster whenever I did it. But I did the only normal thing that I knew to do, which was to go celebrate at a bar in downtown Kansas City. And at about 2 a.m, I'm calling some friends, come get me. They're like, where are you at? I'm behind a post office. I don't know. And whenever I say I call and I'm texting them, it's not like I'm like, hey, Siri, I'm like hitting the three times to get the letter I need in this text message, It's like old school stuff, But I did the thing that I did is that they came and got me and we never talked about it again. It was just one of the things that Tony did and people just accepted it. And then it got to where, work started telling me these things like HR would tell me nothing good happens after midnight. And I'd be like, I disagree. It's like that's when it really gets going pretty good. It's just like I feel pretty good after midnight. And, and then I got this new boss and he was like on me all the time. I mean, he just I don't know if he saw the potential in me or what, but he was on me all the time. And he would call me and he would ask me these really tough questions like, where are you? And I'd be like, look, we're not doing this. You're not going to, I know what you're doing. You're going to fire me and all this stuff. And I would just lose it. And what I can tell you is that I didn't draw a sober breath at any of those times. And I created this plan to actually take 3 months off of work through a Family Medical and Leave Act because the company that I worked for taught us as leaders all about it. So I thought, well, I might as well use it if it's a benefit. So I created this plan that I was going to get sober, And what I did was I took off 3 months from work, and I lived in Tulsa at this time, and I found a therapist in Oklahoma City because that makes perfectly logical sense to have a therapist that's an hour and a half away from you. I will pass 2,000 therapists to get to the one that I randomly picked thinking that this one is going to fix me. And that's what I did. And I went to her office, and we did my intake, and she asked me this simple question, am I in your network? And I said, yes. And that was the first lie I told her right out of the gate because I don't know, because I don't pay my bills. I decided I don't like my house, so I stopped paying the bill. I can tell you what happens is that you get a foreclosure notice from the bank. Well, yeah, it did go wrong. I didn't pay the bill. It went terribly wrong. And but what happens is that that's how I live my life, is that, I decide things like I don't need a telephone because I'm not going to answer it. I don't need utilities because, I'm not going to watch cable, so why do I need the TV? And they send you, in Tulsa, they send you this thick envelope, and I called, for your electricity, and I called that the recommendation envelope. The thin one that comes, it's like in a blue envelope and Broken Arrow, that's the action envelope. That's where you really got to make the decision, do I want this AC or not? And, and that's where it was at. That's how I lived. And all this time, I lied to my parents, and they were giving me money, and I was doing all this stuff, and I was just not being a good son and everything. And the day came where my parents said, no more. Either you get sober or we're not going to, just don't call us. So that's where the therapist came in. So I went to her and I told her all this stuff, and she said, well, you sound like a severe case, and I agreed. Finally somebody understands. And then what happened, she said, come back at the end of the week. And so I did. I went back, and for whatever reason, she asked me this simple question. She said, what's going on? And for the first time in my life, I said, I'm not able to draw a sober breath. All I've done since I left here is drink. And she said, do you think you need some help? And I said, yes. And she called this treatment center in Cushing, Oklahoma, and they said they could get me in on like a Monday. So I had all weekend to get my affairs in order, which really I was homeless at this point because my house had foreclosed. Really that was just packing, up some of the stuff and taking it to mom and dad's and putting the rest in storage and tell them the great news that I've got it figured out and, and all of this stuff. And then she asked me this follow-up question, and she said, well, do you think you need to go to any AA meetings before you go to treatment? And I remember plain as day, I said, I don't think it's that bad. I don't know what AA meetings are. I didn't know anything about it. I just know that I just lost my house. I'm on the run from my job. I've got a $5,000 corporate card bill because I've been working through the loopholes of what you can buy and where you can buy it. Even though I ain't worked in like 60 days, I've been still using it. And so I've got all this weight on my shoulders. And so I make the decision to go to treatment. And I went. And I stayed there for 30 days. And the counselor that I got in that treatment center is the most amazing person. And even to this day, I keep in contact with her. I didn't talk to her for many, many years, but our paths crossed again. And I've been able to talk to her. But she was the first one that told me some serious stuff. She said, you really think that you're important? And I said, well, you don't know me. And she said, I know you drove your 4Runner to treatment and you got a haircut in the parking lot from somebody before you even came in. And I said, well, I needed a haircut, and tried to justify this. And that's the way I was, is that I just really felt that I was important. And what I know is that the ego is what it was, is that I was full of ego and pride, and that I had no ability to connect with anybody or to be of service to anybody because everything was about me. I would manipulate, I would lie, I would steal, I would cheat to get whatever I wanted, and that's how I lived. Never once did I think this was about service to others. Never once did I think that this could be about anything other than me because I needed to feel okay. And that's how I did it. And and I started on that treatment journey and everything, and she gave me this task my first week there. And he was setting the clocks to the same time. And so I was like, okay, whatever. So I'd go around and set all the clocks to the same time and everything. And that was an easy task. And the second week she gave me this task, and I looked on the board and it said I was cleaning tables in the dining room. And I went and I was knocked on her door and I said, Melissa, we've got a problem. And she said, well, what's that? And I said, well, you got me cleaning tables in the dining room. And, I've paid my deductible and I've got insurance. And there's people here that you guys are never going to get your money from. So, maybe they need to clean the tables. And she was like, well, this is exactly why you're cleaning the tables. And she's like, your ego is so grandiose that you think you're above that. And so, my feelings got hurt, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll clean the tables. And then lunch comes, and I start to clean the tables, and I make this realization. Nobody has ever cleaned the tables right. It's just they're dirty underneath, all of this type stuff. And so I go back and report again. And I said, Melissa, I'm going to have to miss some classes because these tables are dirty and nobody's cleaned them right. And she was like, Tony, just clean the tables. And I said, okay. And I did that. And she was the first person to be able to stand up to me and to actually say that, tell me exactly who I am and what I am. And she said, you're an alcoholic, and I know this because the answers that you took on this test. And she goes, aside from the fact it took you 3 hours to take this 20-question test, on your first day, I can look at those and can discuss what you said. And you, my friend, are an alcoholic, and you're going to need to go to AA. And that's what I heard. And so I said, okay. And I did Alcoholics Anonymous meetings while I was in treatment. And then I got out and I got a home group and I got a sponsor and I was doing the thing as what I envisioned was the thing. And I was going to that home group and I was showing up early, staying late, and I was attending, 2-3 meetings a day because I wasn't working again yet. I hadn't gone back from my leave of absence and all this type stuff. And my parents were proud of me and everything was going good. And I went to those meetings for many, many years. And I'm a runner, not by trade. I don't do 5Ks. It's just if something bad happens, I'm going to disclose. I'm just going to leave. And so, I went back to work, and they were like, "Hey, we need to see you." And I said, "I quit." It's just because I knew what it was about. It was about all the stuff I had done, and so I was just like, "I'm out," and so that was how that exited. But I got another job a few months later, and so things were going good. It's just I was sober, I was attending meetings, and I was doing all of this, and I did this for about 4 years before it started to happen. And what happened was simply this: is that I was what I refer to as a meeting maker. Is that I showed up at meetings and I pretended that I was doing any action in the program. And, the only things that I did was in meetings. And I would hear other people talk in meetings, and I would parrot what they said. And my experience is that, whatever we read in the literature, I could relate to. And I would see my sponsor at meetings. I'd be like, hey, Brad. And he'd be like, hey, Tony, how are you doing? And I'd say, good. And there was just all this chaos still going in my life. I was still obsessed with the material. I had not broke down, and I had not reached that place of ego deflation yet. And I can tell you what happened is that, my finances, whenever you have this material obsession tied in with the alcohol, I ran up a lot of bills. I'm just going to say that. And like I said, I don't like to pay bills, but I like to charge stuff and thinking that it's going to all work out somehow, but it doesn't. And but, it's just like I got to this point where I decided I was going to buy a house in sobriety. And I applied for some credit and, knowing that I owe all this stuff. And all that did was let all the creditors know where I live now. And so they all decided that, hey, we want our money back. And I was like, well, I'm not really interested in that. So, I just stopped answering the calls. And what they do is in Oklahoma, they sue you. And so I had to get a bankruptcy attorney. And I went to this guy, and he said some stuff. And I said, all right, I'll think about it, and I just ignored it. And, about 6 months later, I had to file bankruptcy. And this wasn't the first time I did it. This was the second time in my life I had done it. And, him and I started this relationship. And the banks or the courts said, hey, here's the deal is that we're just going to go ahead and take this money out of your check because we know you don't like to pay bills. And I said, well, I don't really like that idea. And they said, that's okay. And we're still doing it. And so I was very resentful at all these people that were taking my money and and everything. And my parents had bought me a house so that I had a place to live. And, and so I'm still ungrateful for everything. And I'm sitting there one day at this meeting, and I've gone, like I said, to a lot of meetings, and I'm sitting there, and I just think, man, I hope Peggy's not here today, because Peggy says the same thing every single time she comes to a meeting. And then I think, if Brad's here, he's going to say the same thing too. And guess who walks in together? Peggy and Brad. And they're sitting there, and then all of a sudden, the first person that gets called on is Peggy, and she's talking. And I just think to myself, I'm listening to her, and I was like, well, that's not how she told that story last time, and I was like, Peggy's a liar, and that's where I was. It was not that I wasn't listening, it was just that Peggy had to be a liar, and then Brad talked, and Brad always ended with that love and tolerance of others is our code, more will be revealed. And I sat there and I thought, nothing more is being revealed. It's the same thing over and over and over again. And I made this decision right then and there that day in Alcoholics Anonymous at 4.5 years without having had a drink, that I had outgrown this group, that I had gotten everything that I can from them because I'm a taker. I was like, I cannot get anything else out of this. And I started going to other meetings in Alcoholics Anonymous around Oklahoma City. And what happens is simply this, is I became that guy that comes in 15 minutes late and leaves 15 minutes early, because I've made this simple decision is that I don't need to know your names. I don't need to know your announcements. I don't need to do your celebrations. All I need is the meat of the meeting, which is that 30 minutes in the middle. And I can tell you, when you don't grow spiritually and you've been like not drinking for 4.5 years, that what happens is that separation happens, or happened for me, is that I separated myself. And I just thought, why do I even need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous? Why do everything is fine? And that's what I did, is I stopped going to AA meetings. And then this lucrative business opportunity came up for me, and I took this. And it was not a principled action business by any means. There was a guy I know, and this is about the time that's, Oxycontin and Loratab were real big, and he had some scripts, and he needed some stuff moved, and I made this plan. that made it all right for me to do what I was doing, which was to pay off my bankruptcy early. I had made a business plan, because I'm a business guy, that if I do X amount of business, then I can pay off this bankruptcy early, and they will stop taking my money. And it all sounds good in my head when I'm just delusional, right? And I've not had a drink, but I can tell you that this is how it actually went, is that on this journey, the guy that I was getting this stuff from actually said, hey, didn't you go to AA? And I said, yes. I was like, well, I got this guy you need to talk to. And I said, absolutely, it did wonders for me. Like, let's talk to him. And so he gave this guy my number, and this guy called me, and he said, hey, I have a problem with drinking. I keep wrecking cars. I keep losing jobs. And I said, Jake, and that called him Jake because that's his name. And I said, let's hit a meeting. And he's like, absolutely. What time tomorrow? And I'd say 8 o'clock tomorrow night. And then he would never call me back, right? And then I would just be like, okay. And then a couple of weeks later, we'd go through the same thing, and he just never would call me back. And I'm just still out here doing the stuff I'm doing, slinging this stuff, not doing principled actions. And then one day I'm at work, and at this time I have this job at a insurance company. I'm licensed by the state, and the alarm company calls me and said, hey, your house has been broken into. And I rush home, and the only thing that was stolen was my stash. And the police get there right after me, and they say, hey, well, what was taken? And I said, nothing. And they were like, so somebody broke in your house and took nothing? And I said, yeah, the alarm worked. It's just like, and they had a lot of follow-up questions. But here I am at 5 years, about this time, 5 years sober, standing in the front of my house, having had 2 doors kicked in with the police there, lying to them. And then I realized this is the best I can do on my own will. That everything that had been talked about in Alcoholics Anonymous, everything that I had learned or I heard in those steps, even though I had not taken any of those actions, was actually coming true, is that I, at the best I can be, is a lie, cheat, steal. That I cannot fix myself, and no material stuff is going to fix me. And I called that guy that was my bankruptcy attorney, who's now my sponsor for about 15 years, and I said, hey, I'm miserable. And he said, well, let's meet up. And we met up, and what he said was that, you have not done Alcoholics Anonymous. What you've done is you've gone to some meetings, and you've prayed some, and that, my friend, has gotten you through this long, but it's not going to last. And you've proven that because you're crazy and you haven't had a drink. And he said, so what we're going to do is we're going to do the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And just so you know, it's located in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, we're going to read it. And where it says write, we're going to write. Where it says pray, we're going to pray. And he launched me on this course of action. And he didn't allow me just to linger around. And we did this, and we did it, quickly. And I had reading assignments, and we talked about stuff, and I was honest. And when I was sitting at this table one day with a group of guys, and we were talking, and I was sharing about how miserable I was because all these people were taking my money, and this guy across the table laughs. And I'm thinking, well, why are you laughing? And he's like, you've got it all wrong, my friend. He goes, they're not taking your money. They're just getting their money back that you took from them. And for some reason, that just set easy with me. And it just made it okay that I owed this money. And and we're sitting here and we're going along, and that guy that I'd got those pills from, he called me one day and he said, hey, do you remember that guy, Jake, that I sent you? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And he said, well, I want to tell you a little story about what happened to him. He said his mom, him, and his dad were out partying one night in Oklahoma City. They went home. They lived about an hour and 20 minutes from Oklahoma City. Jake and his dad got in a fight on the way home. Once they got to the house, what happened is Jake got dropped off at his house. Jake got in his car, went back over to his dad's house, kicked the door, and his dad shot him dead. And I thought, my God. That's alcoholism right there. You know, and the book tells us that we go on to the bitter end or we accept spiritual help. The thing is that the book doesn't tell me what the bitter end looks like, right? It doesn't say that what it's going to look like. And so all I know is that I don't know whenever I get here what the spiritual path looks like either. But I know that there's people in front of me that say, hey, take my hand and let's go, and I will show you. And that is what's happened, and that's what my sponsor had. Now, what the crazy thing that happened at that moment is for the first time in my life, I thought to myself is that I need to pray for somebody else. I had always said the prayers and tried to be present for prayers, but what I said was that I need to pray for that family. And I got in my car after work one day, and I went to the viewing of that body, and I stood next to his body, and I said a prayer. And it's the first time I'd done that. And I saw his dad in the office at the funeral home, and I got to my car, and I said a prayer for that man and that family as well. And it's the first time that I'd ever said a prayer for anybody but myself. And that there started a spiritual journey that I had never felt before. And you know, when I was at a meeting that following week, and I told this guy, I said, hey, I'll see you next week. And what he said was like, well, I don't have a ride. And I said, well, you know what? The bankruptcy court's paying my car payment since, I'm funneling money through them, but they're paying it, so I've got a car, so I can come and get you. He said, well, it's not that easy. I have to have a Department of Corrections badge holder because I'm in a halfway house. And I said, well, you know what's crazy is that I'm a Department of Corrections badge holder. Because whenever I was out there trying to figure out where my role was, I sat in a meeting and somebody said, hey, we need people to take some guys from the halfway house to this meeting, but you got to go through this training. And I went through this training, and I stuck the badge in my junk drawer in the kitchen, and I just thought, I don't even know how to use this. And what happened was that God put somebody in my place in front of me that actually needed that. And so he was like, you've got to be kidding me. And I said, no. And so what happened was for the next 2 years, I picked up guys 3 times a week from that correction facility and actually took them to meetings. And my sole purpose was to get them from point A to point B and back. And that is it. I wasn't sponsoring them. I wasn't allowed to sponsor them. I wasn't anything. I just had to be of service to those guys. And that's what I did. You know, and I did that. And then that led me into getting into corrections work where I could stop thinking about myself for a period of time. And I ended up becoming the area corrections chair for for Oklahoma. And, you know, and I did a lot of things to help, spark that correction stuff. And to this day, I still am involved in correction work, and I seek that out. And I feel like that's my thing is that I can actually connect with people. And, this various experiences come up, but, shortly after, after I started doing this service work with others, and I'd gone through the steps, and I remember sitting down with Cliff one day, and we were doing my 5th step, and he said, well, let's go over your fears list. And one of the fears that I had on there was that, I wouldn't be able to take care of my mom and dad whenever they got older. I said, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And he said, well, are they in good health? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I'll tell you this, if you grow spiritually, you will be able to face anything that's put in front of you, even when that time comes. And I believed that man. And, and I went out and I continued to be of service to others, and I just did everything possible that I could to sponsor people and everything. And then I get this call one Tuesday morning from Cliff. And I'm thinking, okay, well, Cliff never calls me on Tuesday. So I'm thinking back about what I said in the last meeting I was at and, thinking that, I must have done something boneheaded. And he's like, hey, I got this favor of you. And I said, well, what's that? He's like, well, the speaker at the Choctaw Rebellion Dog group, her dad had an accident and she has to go to Stillwater. Can you go and speak that tonight at their group? And I said, absolutely. And so, I get off the phone and I think, well, that's really not convenient. I don't have notice. I don't have, a shirt pressed. Choctaw, there's really no good way to get there. It's all traffic lights. There's not a good exit and all this stuff. And I just, I'm all consumed with self and all this stuff. But I go out there and I do this this speaker at their birthday. And I'm sitting there, and I get up and I tell my story. There's laughing and crying going on. It's mostly me, but it's happening. And then at the very end, this lady gets up and she's getting her 1-year chip, And I thought, man, I'm so blessed to be able to experience, be the speaker at this lady's 1-year thing. And she says this simple thing. She said, if I can get a year sober after everything that's happened and recently, then I know that there's a higher power. And she said, I've lost some jobs, I've wrecked some cars, and I've had some financial difficulties. And then she said, my nephew was killed by his father. And I just sat there for a minute and I thought, what are the chances? And so she finished, and after the meeting I went up to her and I said, hey, I just have a quick question for you. What was your nephew's name? And she said his name was Jake. And I just looked at her and I said, well, I knew Jake. And she said, well, how'd you know him? And I said, look, I'm just going to tell you that I've not always been a good member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, and I've done some unprincipled stuff while I was sober. And I can tell you this, is that Jake had called me about 4 times wanting to get sober and to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, and we just never connected. We just could never meet up. And for that, I'm truly sorry. And she said, so he talked to you about Alcoholics Anonymous? And I said, yes. She said, thank you. He told me that he was talking to somebody about AA and he wanted to get sober, and I didn't know if that was a truth or a lie, and you've answered that for me tonight. And I sat there and I thought, and I just, I didn't think anything. I just let her talk. And she talked to her about her nephew and all the good times and everything. And I went out to my car and I just sat there for a second. And I thought to myself is that, man, there's no way I could have orchestrated this. There's absolutely no way. And then my next thought was, who am I to say there is no God? And see, the thing is I live, like I said, off this material idea of that's what I need to be successful and to be fulfilled. And what I realized is that once I stopped being a taker and I started being a giver, and I had done all the actions that are outlined in the book, and I had made all the amends, and I was growing spiritually, is that God used me as a tool for this time to actually help somebody else heal themselves. And I was speechless, and I just thought, how could I do that? And I continued on in my journey in sobriety. And I just, I continued to do just whatever was put in front of me in every single situation. And, and that day came where, my parents were no longer able to take care of themselves. And I was very active in AA. I was at 5 meetings a week, committees, conferences, everything. And then that day came where my mom had a stroke and my life changed completely just like hers did, is that I became the caretaker for her. And whenever I say caretaker, not like sitting at her house taking care of her, but making sure that she had a place to live, taking care of selling her house, making sure that, she was in a safe place, and that my dad had dementia. And so everything was going, all this stuff was going on, and I was about, 15 years sober at this time. And I'm just thinking, none of my brothers and sisters are helping, and I'm just doing this, and I'm hanging on, and I'm going to one meeting a week, and about half the time they're calling me during it like they've lost something, or they can't do this, or somebody's fallen, and all this type of stuff, and I'm just going through all of this, and I'm hanging on by a thread. And I just keep praying, and I keep praying, and I keep talking to my sponsor, and I keep talking to guys in the group. And then what happens is that, I'm just sitting there. And one day, and I still had a commitment at a medium security prison at this time. And I was trying to do it as much as I can. It was every Monday. It was an hour away from Oklahoma City. And, whenever I say I take care of my parents, that they were in an assisted living facility, and I'd go over on Sunday, I'd get their laundry, I'd clean their apartment, I'd bring back their supplies for their week, which would be their clean clothes, toilet paper, vanilla ice cream, Snickers, and Pepsi. And that was the rotation that we had. And I would tell everybody that oh yeah, I'm doing all this stuff for my parents, and people would pat me on the back, you're such a good son and everything. And then one day my mom called me and she said, hey, and it's Monday and I just left work and I'm speeding to go to the prison, and she's like, hey, we're out of ice cream. I said, are you sure? Because I'm pretty sure I just dropped off 4 half gallons yesterday. And she's like, we're out. And I said, are you sure? And she's like, yeah. So I'm just thinking that, I don't know. My dad has dementia. Maybe he put it in the refrigerator again or something. I don't know. And I said, well, I tell you what, I'll bring you some by tomorrow. Because I'm busy, I'm on the way to prison, and you're proud of me because I go to the prison and get to come home, it's just and so, we're sitting there, and she's like, well, we need it tonight. And I said, you need the ice cream tonight? And she said, yes. And I said, well, it's going to be really late, so I'm really trying to put on the charm and, make it inconvenient and just have her see it my way. And she's like, that's okay. So I said, all right. So I get done at prison at like 8:30, get to Brahms, get over to her apartment at about 9 o'clock or whatever, or almost 10 o'clock, I guess. And I take it in there and I open the freezer and there's 4 half gallons of ice cream in there. So now we've got 8. And so I go in there and she's laying in bed and I said, well, Mom, you had ice cream. And she said, I know. And I said, well, what's going on? And she said, I just wanted to see you. And see, in my mind at that moment, it finally triggered that I thought I was a part of my parents' life. I would fly in, I would rush in there, get their laundry, go do it, come back, clean. I would sweat because their apartment would be 90 degrees, and, I would leave, and then I'd come back again in a couple of days and clean it again. But the reality is that I wasn't spending any time with her. And what I remember is whenever I finally sat down in Alcoholics Anonymous, somebody said, just sit down and be present for a change. And so that's what I did, was I started going back over to their apartment, and I would just sit down, and I would just be present. And I would hold my mom's hand, and, and she had this nervous thing, and she would just sit there and flip channels. So we would sit there, sweat, flip channels, and hold hands, for a couple of hours. But that made her happy. And, and then whenever COVID hit, they both, she had passed away before COVID, and then, he had passed away during COVID, not of COVID. But, and I was left there, and I was like, well, now what do I do? Like, I'm alone is what I'm thinking. But the amount of friends that I had and the spiritual connection is this. And I'm sitting here at home working one day, and this is what happens, is that I'm just frustrated, and I'm just like, I can't take anymore. Like, I'm just, I'm angry, I'm just frustrated, I'm trying to, heal from all of this, and I have a little bit of a spiritual connection, right? I've still got that. I'm back in AA full time, and I'm doing everything, and I'm back into my meeting schedule, and I just sit there and I just say, God, I can't take any more of this. And the power goes out. And so I just sit there, and I'm like, all right. So, for about 10 minutes, I sat there, and I work from home. So, I can't do anything. So I'm just sitting there. And then the power comes on, and 10 minutes later, I get this phone call. And this guy's like, hey, do you remember me I used to come to this treatment center that I was at. I went twice, and I was like, oh, yeah, I know who you are. And he's like, I need a sponsor. And I said, I'm your guy. And I said, be at my house in 2 days, and we're going to start reading the book. And seeing, that's the thing. So whenever I invite God into the situations, because I've grown spiritually, and I know that I have to have a spiritual connection, God delivers every single time. And that's where I'm at in my life. And I would love to say that, everything has been great and everything, but, about a year and a half, or about a year and 2 months ago, I'm at work on Tuesday, and it's a normal Tuesday. I get up, I pray, I shower, I walk in the next room, I log onto my computer, chaos ensues at work, people are calling me, yelling at me, and all this type of stuff, and then there's a message that says all leaders need to be on this call at 10:15. And I get on this call, and this is the job I got right after, I got sober. I've been here for almost 19 years at this point. And I log into this call, and what they say is simply this, is that it's a pre-recorded message, so that's how personal it was. And they said, hey, we're laying off 2,400 people today. You may or may not be one. You'll get an email in the next 30 minutes telling you the fate of your employment with the company. So if you get it and you're no longer employed, then just log off and just do whatever. We'll pay you for another month, and then you'll find out about the rest later. And, and somehow or another, I hung up from that actual call. And then I switched to my email, and there it was. My email got there quick, so I don't know what that says, if I was top of the list or just how it happened. And but I opened it up, and it said, you're no longer employed effective today. And, and the thing is that I sat there, and I thought, well, what am I going to do? And what the book tells me is I pause throughout my day, and I ask God for an intuitive thought or idea. And I just said, God, just be with me. And then the next thing that came to my mind is that I need to be of service to all my employees that are still working, because I know this is not something that anybody knew about, and they're going to need my approvals for stuff. And so that's what I did, is I sent out a mass message and just said, hey, I know you guys need approval, so get them to me. We're not doing anything unethical, but get them to me, and I will get them approved as long as I have access to the system. And gradually throughout the day, I lost access. I lost access to my email. I lost access to this. And then finally, at about 4:15, I lost access to the messaging system. And then I said, my time is done here. And what I know is this, is that there were a lot of people that don't have a program like I do, and they were stressed out and they were worried. And what I knew is this, is that I had been of service to people all day long, and I had known that I'd seen other people before me in Alcoholics Anonymous go through various situations just like this, and they were okay. And I knew that I would be okay no matter what it looked like. Because, see, the material had left me. That desire and that whole thing of I have to have this to be okay, is that I sat there and said, if I have to sell every single thing I own and live in a studio apartment or a sober house, the thing is I'm going to be okay because I have a connection with a higher power. And I don't know what it's going to look like, and I don't need to know, but as long as I take action, then life is going to be okay. And that's where I'm at today. I got a new job. I work with the Oklahoma County Treatment Courts. I do a lot of policy and procedure for them, and I get to make sure that people that are in a criminal situation that get the opportunity to go through a diversion program have the tools and the resources that they need. And that job just kind of fell in my lap. It just was posted one random day on a site that I never looked at, and I looked at it, I saw, applied, and I got interviewed, and I got the job. And it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And it's just amazing that what I do whenever I get out of the way and I invite God into my life, that what can actually happen. So with that, I just appreciate you guys letting me come here and spend the evening with you. And thank you all very much.